Hello, and welcome to my review of 2023. This is where I'll be reviewing all the newly released films that I saw throughout the year of 2023. I've got about 114 films to cover, which is a lot. And even with that being said, there's still plenty of films that I missed, so don't be too angry with me if certain films that you really liked are not on here or not in this video. But with that being said, yes, 114 is a lot. I don't want to waste any more time, so let's get started. Megan, or Mithrigan, whatever. Megan is the movie about the killer girl robot doll. And a lot of people initially thought that, one, this movie was going to be bad based on the trailers, and that, two, this was just going to be girl version of Chucky. And what's great is that it's neither one of those things. First off, the movie is surprisingly good, and it tackles the subject of loss in a way that's more nuanced than you would expect out of a film like this. Furthermore, the film is unique enough to, for lack of better terms, justify its own existence. There's a reason why you would want to watch a movie like Megan as opposed to watching any of the Child's Play films. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. Missing. Missing is the spiritual successor to a film called Searching. In both of these films, the entire perspective of the movie is from a computer screen. Everything that you see is either recorded videos, FaceTime calls, anything that you can see on a computer screen is what the audience will be seeing. So these films are not shown you in a traditional format, and I've always thought that that was really cool. However, in order to make any sort of spiritual success or any sort of sequel or any other movie or product that tries to do the same thing that another product did, in order to be successful, you have to bring the formula to a new height. And I'm afraid that Missing, although it's a pretty decent film, Missing doesn't quite do that. Sure, there's nothing wrong with the story itself. It's a story about a daughter who's trying to figure out what happened to her missing mother, hence the title of the film. However, I feel like there's ways in which this film could have been better. Unfortunately, it doesn't ascend into those new heights. It's just kind of the same thing as Searching. So although it's not a bad film, it's not particularly memorable. Infinity Pool. Infinity Pool is a fascinating film with an equally fascinating concept. Without spoiling it too much, because I don't want to spoil it, but the concept sort of explores what sort of crazy things people are willing to do under these incredibly unique circumstances. Outside of that, this film does use mostly practical effects, which all look amazing in this movie. Overall, if you're looking for a weird, mind-bendy sort of thriller, then yeah, I'd strongly recommend Infinity Pool. This is definitely a film that a lot of people slept on. 80 for Brady. What can I say about 80 for Brady? 80 for Brady has a special place in my heart because it's such a feel-good, fun movie, and it's hard to hate a movie like this. It really is. The premise of the film is really simple. You have four friends who are in their 80s, they're fans of Tom Brady, and they want to go to the Super Bowl. That's it. That is the movie. And on the way to trying to get to the Super Bowl, they get into some hijinks. It's fun. You're just gonna have a good time. If you want a good time, watch 80 for Brady. That's about all I have to say about this movie. Knock at the Cabin. Knock at the Cabin is the newest film by M. Night Shyamalan, but compared to a lot of his other films, this film isn't as, let's say, twisty as his other movies. I don't know, like, Knock at the Cabin is relatively straightforward compared to most of his other films, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, isn't necessarily a good thing either. Why don't I put it like this? Knock at the Cabin, although it's not terrible, is a film that I keep forgetting I saw, so take that however you want to. Consecration. All I'm going to say about Consecration is that I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. I asked two friends of mine to come and see the film with me. They paid for their own tickets, and I still feel bad that they paid for their own tickets. They're probably watching this video, and I'm telling you, I feel bad that the two of you had to pay for your own tickets. That's why, from then on, I pay for my friends' tickets when they go to see a movie with me because I don't want them to pay to see a movie that's bad. Alright? Don't see this one. A Man Called Otto. A Man Called Otto was alright. You know, it's your typical, here's an old man with a heart of stone and he learns how to care about other people. Yeah, it's a film you've probably seen a dozen times. If that's your thing, then that's fine, and then this film is for you, but I realize that this sort of thing may not be everyone's cup of tea. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This was the first MCU film to be released in 2023, and oh boy, this film is not good. There's not really any good things I can even say about it. The way it looks is terrible. The story is terrible. Compared to the rest of the MCU, it's not great. A very, very rough start for the MCU for the year 2023. Cocaine Bear. What's Cocaine Bear about? Well, it's about a bear that does cocaine. All joking aside, there is a bit more to this story than that. This film is based on an internet thread that was made about real life events about an actual real life bear that actually consumed a crap ton of cocaine, and the idea that a bear on that much cocaine might be the ultimate apex predator. All in all, this film is a lot of fun. My only criticism is that it doesn't go far enough. Like, this film could be like more enjoyable. It could be crazier. This film could have gone more nuts with everything. But I still liked what I got. So, yeah, you want to see a bear on cocaine? Watch Cocaine Bear. Sharper. Sharper was an interesting movie. To sort of summarize the plot, the movie Sharper is about a whole bunch of grifters trying to just get a one-up on each other. It's really interesting. That, and, Sebastian Stan's in it. So, yeah, it's a pretty solid film. There's not really too much else to say about it. Operation Fortune. Operation Fortune is one of the newest films by Guy Ritchie. There's another film of his I'm going to be covering later, but sticking to this one's pretty fun. It's got that quick, witty dialogue that you find in most Guy Ritchie films. It's got Jason Statham, it's got Aubrey Plaza, it's got Hugh Grant. What more do you want? House Party. I'll be honest, I did not like House Party, and mainly because it's not really a film. The film spends most of the time, like the camera will just pan over and be like, hey, is that a celebrity? And then the celebrity was standing there like, yep, I'm that celebrity. That is more than half of the movie. More than half of the movie is dedicated to bullshit celebrity cameos. And I wish that they had spent that money, instead of spending it all on getting all these celebrities in there, maybe spending that money on making a good movie. 65 should have been called 69. Hey! Creed 3. Creed 3 was pretty good. And for those of you who don't know, obviously it's the third film of the Creed franchise, but the Creed franchise is a spin-off of the Rocky Balboa franchise. Overall, the story was pretty great. Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors are great in it. The boxing scenes are pretty great. So, yeah, overall it's a pretty damn good movie. Shazam! Fury of the Gods! This was the first DC extended universe film to come out in 2023, the now dead extended cinematic universe, but whatever. This film is a sequel to the first film, Shazam, and if you haven't seen that one, Shazam was really fun. It reminded me of your older, more campier superhero films. Unfortunately, this film didn't feel as fun or as clever as the last one. Unfortunately, it felt just more generic. More of the generic trash that clearly audiences are tired of at this point. Granted, there are some sprinkles of creativity in different parts of the film. Like, for example, there's a part with killer unicorns. But killer unicorns are not enough to save this movie. John Wick 4. John Wick 4 is pretty awesome. If I had any complaints about John Wick 4, it's that there are some scenes that are a bit awkward or that seem to last a little longer than they should. There's one scene in particular where they're fighting in the middle of traffic, where traffic is like going around in a circle, and at some point I was just like, wouldn't traffic have stopped like 5 minutes ago? But I don't know, that's a nitpick. Outside of that, the movie was pretty solid. Tetris. Tetris was a pretty fun movie. This is one out of many films that were released in 2023 that were about the origin of a certain product. And trust me, I'll be covering more films that are just like that. But with all that being said, yeah, overall, I liked it. It was a good time, I liked it. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. As a person who loves playing Dungeons and Dragons, I can happily say that this movie is great. And one of the things that I love about it, and this will be difficult to describe for anybody who doesn't play Dungeons and Dragons, but the way that a lot of scenarios were written in this film really shows how an actual game of D&D works. Like, the level of creativity that the characters demonstrate in the film when trying to tackle certain problems is the same level of creativity that you often see in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And I was really happy to see that on the big screen. So, yeah, if you are somebody who plays Dungeons and Dragons, and don't get mad that this is 5th edition, okay? I'm sorry that I primarily play 5th edition. But if you play Dungeons and Dragons, or even if you don't, and you're curious about what Dungeons and Dragons is like, I would highly recommend this movie. The Super Mario Bros. Movie. Alright, this is a weird film to talk about because I seem to disagree with both audiences and critics. On the one hand, you have a lot of critics who are like, this is the worst film ever. And then on the other hand, you have audiences that are like, this is the best film ever. And I'm just standing in the middle, just saying, it was alright. It was just alright. It's worth noting that the Super Mario Bros. Film is heavily pandered towards small children. Now, me being a man in his 30s, obviously the film's not made for me. But when I was in the auditorium, I could hear all the little kids laughing and just having a blast. So I guess on that metric, I think the film did its job. Air. Here's another product movie. Woo! This movie is about the origin of the shoe Air Jordans. Overall, this movie was, pretty standard. It was your pretty standard biopic. Well, not biopic, because this is about a product, but still, like, film about real life events. Plays it pretty safe. Yeah, it was alright. We're 20 films down, but we still got a lot of films to go, so let's go, 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 go! Renfield. Renfield is an incredibly fun movie. I mean, you've got Nicolas Cage playing Dracula. You can't really go wrong with that. But if I'm being honest, the only complaint that I have about Renfield can be summarized in one word, and that's Awkwafina. I don't really care too much about Awkwafina in this film. I'm not really convinced of her being a cop, but outside of that, Renfield is a blast, and it's a great film for all my fellow Nicolas Cage fans out there. The Pope's Exorcist. The Pope's Exorcist is a film that I oddly enjoy, even though on paper I shouldn't. For the first half of the film, it is like the most generic exorcist type of film that I've seen over a dozen times. I wasn't entirely sold on this film until the second half, where you have this really cool exorcism battle, and maybe I'm just dumb for liking that, but maybe if I rewatch it, I'll hate it more. But for now, whatever. I guess I thought it was alright. Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead Rise is pretty good. This film is one of the Evil Dead properties that does not have Bruce Campbell in it, and it does take itself a bit more seriously than some of the more campier Sam Raimi Evil Dead properties, but it's still a really great film for those of you who like horror films, and especially those of you who are fans of the Evil Dead. Beau is Afraid. If you've seen my top 10 video, then you know that I really like Beau is Afraid. I really like Ari Aster as a director. I like Hereditary and Midsommar. However, I realize that this film is not for most people. The reason it's in my top 10 is because it is a fantastic film for me. But just because I like a 3-hour surrealist nightmare ride, that doesn't mean that most people will like that. So you can take that information however you want to. Ghosted. I honestly keep forgetting that I saw this movie. This is such a forgettable movie. Most people online have said that the film feels like it was written entirely by AI, and yeah, I think they're right. This is just a really bland, generic, forgettable movie. Don't see it. Sisu. Sisu is awesome. If you want to see an old man kill a bunch of Nazis, then yeah, see Sisu. Champions. Champions was alright. Not really too much to say about this film. It was just alright. Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world. Easily the longest title out of all the films I saw in 2023. This is a biopic about the grill guy. Yes, that George Foreman. But I'm sure some of you didn't know that he's more well known for being in heavyweight boxing, mainly winning the heavyweight boxing championship twice, 20 years apart. So yeah, if you want to know a little bit more about George Foreman, the grill guy, then yeah, watch this movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is easily the best MCU film to have been released in 2023. All I'll say is this film is good enough to make you feel really sad about CGI animals. Inside. Not to be confused with the film that Bo Burnham put out a few years ago. This is a film starring Willem Dafoe where he's trapped inside of a person's luxury apartment. Overall, I thought the movie was just alright. Polite Society. Polite Society is a really fun movie that mostly flew under the radar. It's about a young girl who really wants to be a stunt woman or a stunt actress or whatever the proper term is for that. But as a result of this, there's a lot of these fun fight choreography scenes throughout the film that are really over the top, and yeah, the film is just a lot of fun to watch. So yes, I would recommend this. Fool's Paradise. Fool's Paradise is the directorial debut from Charlie Day, a man that people have told me I look like, but I don't know, you could be the judge of that. The first thing I'll say is that anybody expecting this film to be like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia might be a bit disappointed, because the humor in this film, although it is a funny film, there's a lot of humor in it, It's not the same type of humor that you find in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Fool's Paradise is actually heavily inspired by another film called Being There. So the humor is actually, well, the humor is very similar to this. The plot of Fool's Paradise is very similar to the plot of Being There. So if you're familiar with the plot of Being There, you're probably going to like Fool's Paradise. I think that Being There is the superior film of the two, but I still like Fool's Paradise for what it is. The Covenant. The Covenant is the second Guy Ritchie film that I saw in 2023. It's a military movie set in the Middle East that looks at a relationship between Jake Gyllenhaal's character, who is a U.S. military officer, and an interpreter. Overall, I thought The Covenant was... yeah, it was just alright. Still is a really great documentary that really gives us a good look into the world of Michael J. Fox and in his medical condition. I think the film does a masterful job of going through his life, talking about some of the struggles that he's dealt with throughout his career. It's a great documentary. Go watch Still. Hypnotic. All I have to say about Hypnotic is that it is a shittier version of Inception. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It was a shittier version of Inception. 1001. I'll be honest, 1001 was close to making my top 10. 1001 is brilliant. I don't want to go too much into spoilers, but it's primarily about a woman who wants to give a young boy a better life, and this story is told with the backdrop of gentrification and a whole bunch of other gentrification, stop and frisk, and all the things that come bundled with that. Cinematography is great, performances are great, the writing's great. Yeah, 1001 is a great film. And as I said, it almost made my top 10. Kandahar. Kandahar is just The Covenant, but with different people. I don't know, like The Covenant and Kandahar, these two films sort of blend together in my brain. The Machine. The Machine is the movie by and about comedian Bert Kreischer. God, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Overall, I thought the film was alright, and I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I'll be honest, I don't watch too much of his stand-up, but I'm pretty sure for anybody who is a fan of his will probably really like this movie. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. My only complaint about this film is that it's part 1. In other words, we don't have the complete story yet. But outside of that, the first part of this overall story that we have so far is pretty damn great. Great enough that it actually ended up in my top 10. Reality. This is another great film that sort of flew under the radar that a lot of people don't really talk about. This is the movie about the real-life person named, and I'm not making this up, Reality Winner? That's the real name, Reality Lee Winner. The film primarily focuses on the questioning between Reality and FBI agents. The entire film is incredibly gripping in spite of the fact that most of it just takes place in one room. I really liked it. I thought it was great. However, I can understand if other people wouldn't like it or if they thought that the film was a bit too dry for them. We just finished going over 40 films, but we still got a lot more films to go, so let's keep going. Magic Mike's Last Dance. Magic Mike's Last Dance is actually pretty solid, and to me it kind of takes the best parts of the previous two films and puts them in the one movie. I don't know, if you like the first two films, you're definitely going to like this one. The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman isn't a bad film, it's just like a dozen other films, hell, even more than that. It's like several dozen other horror films that I've seen already. Literally most horror films that have to do with some sort of creature or shadow demon that terrorizes a family in an old house or something like that. This film is just like all of those. It's not bad, it's something that I've seen before. The Little Mermaid remake. The best thing I can say about the Little Mermaid remake is that it's not the worst Disney remake I've seen. This film suffers from the same issues that you find in a lot of Disney remakes. They add songs that are pointless, the visuals for some of the non-human characters look terrifying, and yeah, it's just a shittier version of what the original film did. So, yeah, that's that. Shooting Stars. Shooting Stars is a film about LeBron James and his friends getting their start in basketball in high school. Overall, I thought the film was alright. I mean, you want to know more about LeBron James, then yeah, give the film a shot. The Flash. The Flash is the second DCEU film that I saw in 2023. Overall, this movie is not good. The story is okay. It's not terrible, but the biggest complaint, or one of the biggest complaints I have that most people do, is the, quote, PlayStation 2 looking CGI. Yeah, the visual effects in some of these scenes is garbage. It's amazing that this even got released looking the way that it does. But at least I can take comfort in knowing that I won't be seeing any more Ezra Miller Flash movies. The Blackening. The Blackening is really funny. It's really funny. If you want a good laugh, then I highly recommend it. No Hard Feelings. Overall, I thought No Hard Feelings was alright. There were some parts that were a little funny, and there were some where, I mean, I guess just for my taste, the jokes weren't too great. I know that some people were a bit weird about this film because of the age gap between these two characters. It kind of reminds me of this discussions that people were having about the 2021 film Licorice Pizza. But outside of that, as I said, it was alright. Asteroid City. Asteroid City is the newest feature-length film by Wes Anderson. Overall, I thought Asteroid City was pretty good. The reason why it doesn't really stand out too much in my brain when I think about 2023 and the films that came out is because Asteroid City is kind of on the same level as The French Dispatch, which came out in 2021. But just like with The French Dispatch, if you are a big Wes Anderson fan, you like his style of films, then yeah, you are going to love this movie. Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. This is another one of those movies that I keep forgetting I saw. I mean, why don't I ask you, any of you who have seen a lot of these newer Transformers films, aren't they all just the same at this point? You know, some big enemies come around, they fuck shit up. You got some human characters that nobody cares about, and then there's a scene where Optimus is pepping people up and he's like, we gotta bring the fight to them, and then the human characters are just looking up at them. I don't know, that's what this film was. That's what I think every single Transformers film is. I don't care. I don't care about this movie. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. You know, speaking of movies I don't give a shit about. To be fair, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny it's not terrible. It's okay. Yeah, it's weird that an Indiana Jones film is just okay. It's not good, it's not great. It's just okay. I know everyone else has talked about this already, but that opening scene where they do the deep fake on Harrison Ford to make him look younger, but he still moves around and talks like an 80,000-year-old man. Like, yeah, it looks awful. Again, like the last film I was talking about, I don't care about this film either. Insidious: The Red Door. It might be hard to tell because of the giant lighting that I have right here, but this poster is a poster for Insidious: The Red Door. And this poster reminds me every single day how much I hate that movie. One of my biggest issues with the film is how much the plot is rushed. The first half of the film, it's like they don't really do anything. So then you have not that much time to wrap up this big plot conflict between the son and the father character, and it kind of looks like this. Dad, you tried to kill me! No, son, I was possessed. Oh, okay. Those of you who haven't seen this film are going to think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. So yeah, don't bother with Insidious the Red Door. I don't know, watch The Last Key instead. Like, that film is so much better. Joyride. Overall, Joyride is a pretty fun film. It's your typical comedy where you have four friends getting into hijinks. And yeah, that's pretty much it. With that being said, 80 for Brady is still the number one in that category for 2023, but no, I still overall like Joyride. It's a fun movie. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is actually pretty damn good. I really liked it. Of course, we could talk about how good the action sequences are, and like all the stunts and shit, and Tom Cruise. However, on top of that, I think that they chose a really interesting plot, especially given some people's current fears about AI. So I thought it was pretty relevant, surprisingly relevant. Overall, if you like action espionage films, and if you're a fan of the rest of the Mission Impossible series, then yeah, you're going to love this movie. Sound of Freedom. Overall, I thought Sound of Freedom was a pretty solid film. The film's not bad, but it's not particularly great. I mean, I think it just needed to go a little bit further with either the way it was shot, the acting, this and that, just little things here and there that could really bring the film up. But as it stands, I think the film is still pretty solid, and I can see why it gained some popularity for the time that it was out. Book Club: The Next Chapter. This is a sequel to the film Book Club, which came out a couple years ago. If I'm being honest, I thought that the first film was pretty fun. But unfortunately, the second film isn't as fun as the first one. One of my biggest issues with this second film is that there's a lot of montages. There are so many montages. I don't know, as far as movies go that have a group of four old friends, 80 for Brady is still number one for me for 2023, so this movie was just okay. If you want to see it, that's fine. Whatever. Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer was the national phenomenon where people went to see both Oppenheimer and Barbie on the same day. Naturally, I was one of those people. I saw Oppenheimer first, and then later in the day went and saw Barbie. Really quick before diving into these films, I do want to mention how awesome it was to see this many people go out to the theaters again. Like, for a brief period of time, it's like, yes, movie theaters are back! Movie theaters are alive again! Anyway, I'm going to review these in the order that I saw them. So let's start with Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is in my top 10, so obviously I think the film is great. I think the film's great. On paper, the film sounds like it should be boring. It's 3 hours of guys talking about theoretical physics. But I don't know, I had a blast for the whole 3 hours. Most reviews online have talked about how visually this film looks great, and yeah, I agree. The film looks spectacular. I also have to mention that Cillian Murphy, the man who plays Oppenheimer, he is fantastic in this movie. He definitely deserves to be nominated for Best Actor. So yeah, if you've got 3 hours to kill, yeah, this is an easy recommendation. Barbie. Barbie is also in my top 10, so I think that Barbie is an excellent film as well. I think the set pieces are fantastic. Margot Robbie's great in this. Ryan Gosling is hilarious. If I were to criticize this film at all, it's that its messaging can be a little heavy handed at times. As I said, I thought this film was excellent. It is in my top 10. So, yeah, again, this is another easy recommendation. Talk to Me. Talk to Me is pretty good. A lot of the reviews I saw for Talk to Me makes it sound like it's the best horror film of 2023, and I didn't think it was that good, but I'm gonna give this film the benefit of the doubt that maybe I just have to watch it a second time and maybe I'll have a better appreciation for it. I mean, that's happened to me plenty of times, so I'm sure it could probably happen to me this time if I choose to rewatch it. But yeah, if you're looking for a pretty solid horror film, a pretty unique one at that, yeah, watch Talk to Me. The Beanie Bubble. Here we go. Here's another movie about a product. This film covers the creation of the Beanie Babies, and it also covers a period of time when a lot of people were obsessed with purchasing Beanie Babies, and there was I don't know if it's fair to call it like a black market for Beanie Babies online where people were selling them for a shit ton of money. Just like with the movie Air, that was a movie about the creation of Air Jordans, I thought the Beanie Bubble was alright. It, just like with Air, it sort of plays things safe. It's not bad. It's not doing anything groundbreaking either. I mean, I don't know, if you're curious about Beanie Babies, then yeah, you can watch it. Hey, and it's a movie where Zach Galifianakis doesn't have a beard. I didn't even recognize him at first. Haunted Mansion. This film is not terrible, but it's not good either. I don't know, all I'll say is I like the one with Eddie Murphy better. We're about halfway through this list, but we're just gonna keep going. We're gonna keep on keeping on. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. This film was surprisingly good. And one of the things that was obvious from the trailers is that they were a bit inspired by the Spider-Man animation style, although they did take their own little spin on, the sort of art style that they have. However, overall, yeah, I thought that the story was pretty solid. I really enjoyed this movie. Meg 2, The Trench. I did not care for this movie. I know this is supposed to be like a dumb action film with these giant Meg shark whatevers, but like, I don't know, the film just ended up being dumb. I mean, there's action in it, but honestly, it's nothing I haven't already seen before, and I don't know. I didn't care about this movie. The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This film is what happens when you take a small section of the Dracula story and spread it out over a feature-length film. Overall, I thought that this film was almost great. Like, I thought it was pretty good, but I think that it needed to just do a little bit more in order for it to be even better. One criticism I have of this film that other people online have of the movie is its portrayal of Dracula. Like, the film talks about how Dracula isn't just a beast, but he's also very intelligent, but the film only ever shows the beast side of Dracula and rarely, if ever, shows the intelligent side, and I wish I could have seen more of that. But you know what? Overall, the film that we ended up getting was still pretty good, so whatever. Jules. There's not really too much to say about this film. It's about a man suffering with the early stages of Alzheimer's, and an alien crashes into his backyard. I'm sure some of you are thinking with a concept like that alone, that makes for a lot of excitement, but this film is actually pretty tame for the most part. It's not very exciting. It's very, I don't know, it's just sort of bland. Overall, this film was just kind of meh. Strays. Strays was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I did go into this film thinking that it was going to be complete dog shit. Funny. But honestly, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't great either. I mean, look, this film is pretty straightforward. It's Hey, what if the animals in Homeward Bound swore? What if they swore and drank and did mushrooms? Like, yeah, like that's what Strays is. That, yeah, Strays is the rated R Homeward Bound. If any of you even remember what Homeward Bound is. Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo was surprisingly good. It's a film about a kid who went from being obsessed with the video game Gran Turismo and ends up becoming a professional race car driver. I'm not gonna lie, the story was exciting, it was gripping, like I was very invested throughout the entire movie, which I was not expecting from a film about a PlayStation video game. So, yeah, overall, I think this film was pretty good. Blue Beetle. Here's another superhero film entry from the now dead DCEU. Although, to be fair, a lot of people, myself included, didn't really know if this film was a part of the old DCU or if this was going to be a part of James Gunn's DCU, and let's face it, who cares? Yeah, this film doesn't really do a whole lot that other films like it haven't already done before. Honestly, one of my main criticisms of this film is that there are times where it seems to be tonally confused. Like, there are times where you'll see, like, you'll have these really serious moments where a character dies, but then it'll be followed up with, like, fart jokes. I don't know. That's Blue Beetle for you. Retribution. Retribution is awful. It is awful. It is a shittier version of that film Speed with Keanu Reeves. In fact, I rewatched Speed after watching Retribution, and yeah, like, Speed is 1,000 times better than Retribution could ever hope to be. Now, if you're wondering why I'm comparing this to Speed, it pretty much the same concept. You have Liam Neeson, he gets into a car. Oh, turns out there's pressure plates beneath the seats that are tied to an explosive in his car. And if he gets up or stops driving, does all this shit, then the car will explode. Yeah, it's Speed, but worse. Golda. Golda is a film that I want to like. And it's a film that honestly could have been great. For those of you who don't know what this film is about, it is about Golda, who was the Prime Minister of Israel, but more specifically, this film looks at her leadership during the Yom Kippur War. You'd figure with a topic like that, there is a lot to unpack, and there should be, but the film's only like an hour and 30 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes. Either way, that's not a lot of time. And to put this into perspective, Oppenheimer, which I talked about earlier, that film's 3 hours. Like, honestly, this film, Golda, should have been longer. It should have been much longer in order to properly tackle the topic that it was trying to discuss. But I mention this crunch for time because I think that that leads to why, even though the subject matter was very serious and it dealt with the many lives that were lost during that time, as an audience member, I just felt very disconnected from it all. Like the film felt very disconnected from it all. And I think a part of it has to do with the short runtime. Another part might have to do with the fact that there was only ever like 3 rooms that the film took place in ever. The things you need for a great film are all there. It just wasn't done. And it's made even more obvious when a film like this comes out in the same year as a film like Oppenheimer. So yeah, this is a film that I wish I liked more, but unfortunately it just falls too short. The Equalizer 3. The Equalizer 3 was actually pretty solid. Not much more I can say. I mean, it's just like the first 2 films, so if you like the first 2 Equalizer films, you're going to like this one. The Nun 2. This is the newest installment of the Conjuring universe, and it's complete garbage. I went and saw this film with a friend of mine, and we both joked about it later, saying that, you could tell how scary the film was because this like 8-year-old or some young kid was in the audience and they were not phased by this film at all. But I don't know, if you're a huge fan of the Conjuring universe and you want to know how Valak, or the nun, got its yellow eyes, yes, that's what this film is about. It's how did the nun get its yellow eyes? Okay, then yeah, see this garbage pile of a film, but otherwise, yeah, it's not worth it. Elemental. I don't know. Elemental isn't terrible, but it is forgettable. Elemental is sort of like a bottom of the barrel standard Pixar Disney type of film where you have the sort of same plot beats, you have somewhat decent animation, and then of course then you'll have conflicts that sort of appear out of nowhere. Uh yeah, I don't know. I don't really care for this movie. Bottoms. Bottoms was in my top 10 for films I saw in 2023. I thought this film was hilarious. It is very funny. It's pretty raunchy. It's a bit more Gen Z, I guess, for some of the older people that might be watching this and don't really understand Gen Z kind of stuff. But if that doesn't bother you, you want to look for another like high school comedy, kind of like Superbad, but more Gen Z, then yeah, I would highly recommend Bottoms. Like, yeah, this film was great. The Wrath of Becky. The Wrath of Becky is a sequel to the film Becky that came out a couple years ago. Becky is actually a pretty good film. I really liked it. I thought it was very clever, but I can't really say the same about this second film. I don't know, I just don't think that The Wrath of Becky was as clever or as well written or as well put together as the first film. Yeah, I thought the first film was much better, and yeah, I don't know, this film's just not that good. So I mean, if you've never heard of either of these films, I'd highly recommend the first one, but you could skip out on this second one. A Haunting in Venice. This is the third film in that franchise with the detective with the big ass mustache. The first one was Murder on the Orient Express, second one was Death on the Nile, and now we have A Haunting in Venice. Overall, this film was fine. I know it tried to crank up some horror elements, I guess, but it's mostly still just your standard Agatha Christie type murder mystery film where it all, you have all these twists and turns, and then it accumulates to the detective gathering everybody in a room and being like, Sacre bleu, the killer. If you like the first two films, you'll definitely like this one. But if you're not a fan of the Agatha Christie type stuff, then yeah, you're probably going to hate this. The Inventor. Well, if there's one thing I wasn't expecting to watch a stop motion ish animation film. Although half of it is 2D animation, but a lot of it is this like stop motion animation that's very reminiscent of, and I'm blanking on the studio's name, but the same one that did like The Year Without a Santa Claus and all those like older Christmas films. It's sort of animated like that. Overall, I thought the film was fine. I mean, clearly this subject it's clearly a passion for the movie director, but yeah, I mean, if you want to see a more modern film that kind of looks like those older films, then maybe give this film a shot, but yeah, it didn't blow me away, but it wasn't like offensive either. It was fine. It was fine. The Retirement Plan. I went and saw this film for one reason and one reason only. Nicolas Cage. As far as Nicolas Cage films go, this film is nah. The Retirement Plan is your typical storyline of, oh, here's this guy who used to be a really good assassin, but then they're retired, but then something happens to make them not retired. I mean, yeah, this is like the John Wick formula, but not done as well. I'll say that the best part about this is that Nicolas Cage is in it because I'm a Nicolas Cage fanboy, but yeah, outside of that, I don't know, just watch John Wick or Sisu or I don't know, any of the other films that have this exact same formula. It lives inside. This film wasn't great, but I'll still say that it was interesting. It's kind of on the same level as The Boogeyman, which I reviewed earlier, where I said that it sort of reminded me of a whole bunch of other horror films, and yeah, honestly, this film does the same thing. Doesn't really bring a whole lot new to the table, but it's not bad either. It's fine for what it is, but it's not something that I'm rushing to recommend to anybody. No One Will Save You. I actually really like this movie, but I can understand why others wouldn't. The plot of this film is pretty simple. There's a woman who lives by herself in a house that's pretty secluded, and she gets attacked by aliens in the midst of an alien invasion. One of the strengths of this film is how well I, as an audience member, was able to get into the head of the main character, in spite of the fact that she says like 5 words, maybe, throughout the whole film. Like, she hardly talks. And yet it's pretty clear from, honestly, her, I forget the actress's name, but it's clear from her performance, like, what's going on. Like, it's very impressive. Going back to why I think some people wouldn't like this film, the plot is at times very open-ended, or very open to interpretation. I know a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people want their answers, and they want their answers right now. But this film doesn't exactly give you those. It lets you speculate on what did and didn't happen, or why things happened the way that they did. And I'm fine with that. But if you're not the person who's okay with that, then yeah, maybe don't watch this film. But if you're fine with it and you want to see a pretty decent alien movie, then yeah, check it out. Expendables. This is the fourth Expendables film because apparently they're still making them. Like with the rest of the Expendables franchise, I thought the film was mostly dumb. Like, there are much better, like, hardcore action films out there, and these are, like, the dumb hardcore action films out of all the hardcore action films that are out there. There was one thing that this film did, and I'm not going to be specific about it, but I'll just say the film did something towards the beginning of the film that I thought was pretty brave. It was pretty cool. And then you get towards the end of the film where they just undo that thing. And I'm like, wow, this film doesn't have any balls. Like, this film doesn't have the balls to commit to that thing that I thought was really cool. Don't bother with this movie. Like, I don't know. Look, if you want a good action film, watch The Raid 2. And I don't know what you're thinking, but shouldn't I watch The Raid 1? No, fuck that. Watch The Raid 2. Just watch The Raid 2. Whew. Still got about 34 more films to go. Yeah. Dumb Money. Dumb Money is a movie about the real-life events that only took place a few years ago? Anybody else remember when a bunch of people were buying stocks for GameStop? Anybody remember that? Well, that's what this entire movie is about. It's about the guy who convinced an entire internet's worth of people to buy stock through Robinhood of GameStop. Dumb Money is your standard based on real life events type of film. It's not bad, but it doesn't exactly do anything new either. So overall, it's just alright. Saw X. A lot of people have called Saw X a return to form of the Saw franchise, and yeah, I think those people are correct. After less than stellar films in the franchise, like Jigsaw and especially after Spiral. It's nice to get a Saw film that actually feels like a Saw movie. Overall, I think that this film is great if you're already a fan of the Saw franchise. I know that there's a lot of people who are very turned off at the concept of the Saw franchise. Yeah, if you like the films, check it out. If you don't, don't. The Creator. Overall, I thought The Creator was fine. The film doesn't really stand out in my memory, and even though it has really good visuals, the story was just okay. The Exorcist Believer. The Exorcist Believer is not good. It's really awful. The film doesn't make sense at times, and at worst, now keep in mind this is a horror film. Obviously, it's The Exorcist, but there are parts where this film is funny. Like, I was laughing at certain parts of this film because it's just so dumb. Look, if you ask me, if you want a good Exorcist film, don't watch Exorcist Believer. I'd recommend Exorcist 3. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, shouldn't I watch the first Exorcist? But fuck that. Watch Exorcist 3. Just watch Exorcist 3. Pet Cemetery Bloodlines. Was anyone asking for a prequel to the remake of Pet Sematary? Yeah, as you can tell by my tone, this film is trash. I don't understand who it's for. I don't know who wanted it. And not only that, the story of Pet Sematary Bloodlines makes the story of the Pet Sematary remake, it makes that story make less sense. Like, if things played out the way that it did in Pet Sematary Bloodlines, then I don't understand why certain characters would act the way that they do in the Pet Sematary remake. Whatever, I skip out on this one. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. At the time of recording this section of the video, because I've been dragging my feet on this, the trailer for the sequel to this film has already been released, and I can see that they have a bigger budget. But enough about the future sequel. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, as you could probably guess, is not good. Like, it's not good at all. Killers of the Flower Moon. Finally, some good fucking food. Killers of the Flower Moon is in my top 10 for films that I saw in 2023. And for good reason. It's Martin Scorsese, and you know what? He doesn't miss. Sure, the film is almost 4 hours long, and sure, if you're seeing it in the theater, it could have helped if they had an intermission, but the film looks great, the story's great, the performances are great. Hey, Lily Gladstone is amazing in this film. I was just nominated for an Oscar. Robert De Niro is great, and yeah, this is a great movie. If you like Martin Scorsese films and you've got almost 4 hours to kill, then yeah, watch Killers of the Flower Moon. Peter and the Wolf. Peter and the Wolf is this animated short film based on a children's book, and for what it is, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, since it's a short film, I don't really have too much to say about it. It's a pretty straightforward story about a kid named Peter, and he runs into a wolf in the forest, and that's it. Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's is a really odd film. I mean, yeah, obviously you had the Jim Henson Studios working on the animatronics, so of course they look great. The first part of the story was fine, and then the story just takes a nosedive in the second half. When you find out about certain character motivations, and you find out about, I guess, what does, for spoilers, what does help the ghost children or what doesn't, it raises a lot of questions, like, how come things happen the way they did? How come the police officer daughter, why was she bothering to talk to him in the first place? Why didn't anybody think to do that with relation to the ghost children to begin with? Why does Matthew Lillard sound like that? I don't know. I think the beginning of the story was fine, and then it kind of just got stupid in the second half. What happens later? This is the newest film by Meg Ryan, also starring Meg Ryan, and it's about two people running into each other in an airport. Two people who previously had a relationship with each other at some point in the distant past, and them sort of just hashing things out with each other. Yeah, that's the whole movie. One of the downsides of this film is that there's times where it tries a little too hard to be a bit cheeky. There's an announcer voice throughout the entire airport, and there's this recurring gag where he's just like, look up, and then they're just like, huh? And then they gotta look up at a sign that says, get to know each other, or it's some like fourth wall breaking bullshit. But outside of that, this movie was just okay. I don't know. It's another one of those like romance. Hey, we're old and we're lonely. Flora and Son. Flora and Son, I thought was actually pretty good. I really like the musical numbers in there. Of course, the entire film is about some people either learning about creating music or people just creating some music in general. It's about a relationship between Flora, who's the main character, and her son, hence the name of the film. But yeah, I thought the performances were pretty good. The musical beats were pretty good. Yeah, overall, I thought the movie was pretty good. I liked it. Freelance. Freelance is basically 2023's version of The Lost City, which came out in 2022. In this case, instead of Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock, we have John Cena and Alison Brie. This film is basically just the same as The Lost City, but instead of a lost city, you have these two characters in a country that's ran by a dictator, but then you realize that the dictator is not actually a bad guy because he actually likes his people and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I don't know. It was just alright. Fingernails. Fingernails is an interesting movie. It's one of those films that's trying to say something about how relationships work, how they can sometimes break, or how complicated romantic relationships can be. As far as how well it does it, I think it's fine. Yeah, I mean, it was fine, but I'm not rushing to recommend this to anybody. The Marvels. You know what? I'll say that I don't think this movie is as bad as a lot of people online are making it sound. To give the Marvels some credit, this film actually tries to be creative. In fact, it tries to be more creative than a lot of other MCU products that came out in 2023. The Marvels has this interesting plot point where Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Monica Rambeau's characters, their powers get sort of intertwined with each other. Like, if any one of them uses their abilities, then they switch places in space. It's really cool, and it's an interesting thing to add to a story where the characters can't just punch their way out of this problem. They have to use their brains and think about how it is they move forward. And I've been wanting Marvel properties to do something like this for a long time instead of just having every single movie be, hey, let's punch a bad guy. So overall, I liked The Marvels just for the fact that it was very creative, and it was very creative in ways that I've wanted to see in Marvel films for a long time. Whatever. That's my thoughts on The Marvels. Not as bad as I think most people are saying it is. The Marsh King's Daughter. The Marsh King's Daughter was okay. Anatomy of a Fall. Anatomy of a Fall is fantastic. This film is in my top 10 films for films that I saw in 2023, and yeah, and this is probably one of the best dramas of the year in my opinion. Every person I know who likes dramas, I've been recommending this film to them non-stop. It's a very gripping story about the death of the main character's husband and the discussion on whether or not she was the one who did it or not. And there's a lot of compelling arguments that sort of push you back and forth on, oh yeah, she totally did it, to, oh, I don't think she did it. Yeah, I highly recommend this movie. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, it's an animated film about a teenage girl Kraken? Yeah, it's her and her Kraken family just living amongst humans, and then she finds out that she has these like Kraken abilities or something. This is just another coming of age or getting into puberty type films that's not explicitly about puberty. There was a film that came out in 2022 that was exactly like this called Turning Red. And honestly, I thought Ruby Gillman was a worse version of Turning Red. Overall, I thought Turning Red was funnier. It had more charm and wit to it, whereas Ruby Gillman just felt like it was created by a machine. It just felt like so many other animated films out there. It didn't have as much charm or wit to it as something like Turning Red. So yeah, if you were thinking about watching Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, I mean, I would recommend that you skip this one and just watch Turning Red instead. Priscilla is actually really good. I really liked this one. I will say that some people, and even some of you, might not like this film because there are plenty of parts of the film that kind of make Elvis look like an asshole. In 2022, we got that pretty damn good movie Elvis that actually makes him look pretty good, so it's very bold for us to get a film a year later about Priscilla that doesn't exactly paint Elvis in a good light. But if that doesn't bother you, then yeah, I would highly recommend this film. I thought it was pretty damn good. Please Don't Destroy The Treasure of Foggy Mountain. You know, speaking of films that feel like they were created by a machine, this is one of them. So there have been a few films that I've covered in this video about either a group of friends or a group of people getting into hijinks. We have 80 for Brady. There was also Joyride. But I have to say that Please Don't Destroy The Treasure of Foggy Mountain is the worst version of that kind of film. This film is filled with just like bottom of the barrel bullshit. Like, this film doesn't try to do anything new. A lot of stuff that's done in this film is done in a lot of other films. The humor falls flat. All three of the characters in the main friend group, they're all basically the same character. And half the jokes are just references to pop culture that nobody's going to care about in 10 years. So this film is never going to age well like a film like Superbad. So yeah, I don't know. I really hated this movie. This movie's fucking trash. I hated it. Saltburn. Saltburn is a weird film, and well, it's weird for many reasons. But the main reason why I think it's weird is because it's weird to talk about. Like, I don't think that this film is particularly great, in spite of the fact that there are so many things that I think are great about it. Like, I'm a sucker for artsy shit, so I don't mind the artsy aspect ratio of the film. I think that the way it was shot was pretty great. I think the performances were pretty great. The soundtrack is pretty great. Hell, even the shocking moments that I think, a lot of people, or pretty much everybody who's seen this film likes to talk about, I like those shocking moments. It's just a question of whether or not this all works together as one package, and I'm not sure if it really does. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a bit too nitpicky with this film. I know that there's plenty of people who are not film nerds who have seen this and they enjoyed it, so there's a good chance that if you want a weird drama, then yeah, watch Saltburn. Yeah. This is it. This is the final 14, and honestly, God bless any of you who've made it this far. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a really fun kind of horror film. Yeah, the story is kind of a mess, but the story doesn't really have to work. It's just supposed to be a fun, gory mess that happens to be about Thanksgiving. And you know what? The film delivers on all of that, so yeah, it gives me something else to watch other than planes, trains, and automobiles on Thanksgiving. Napoleon. Napoleon I thought was alright. There's a lot of good scenes in it. Unfortunately, some of these really well shot scenes were kind of spoiled for me in the trailer. Uh, Outside of that, I feel like the film probably could have been longer so that it didn't feel like we're just jumping from one place to the other. And, I'm no Napoleon expert, and maybe this is how Napoleon was in real life, but there are some parts of the film where he kind of comes off like a pussy. I don't know. That might just be me. Again, I'm no Napoleon historian, but okay, with regards to the film was just alright. The Killer. The Killer was a pretty solid film. Like, I liked it. It's not in my top 10, but yeah, overall, I thought that the film was pretty good. Godzilla Minus One. Speaking of my top 10, Godzilla Minus One is in my top 10, and for good reason. This movie is fantastic. I really, really like this movie. The way it looks is great, and as of the recording of this is after the Oscars, which means I've been really dragging my feet on this, but Godzilla Minus One did win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and it deserves that. But on a side note, the human plot for Godzilla Minus One is really, really good. And oftentimes with the American Godzilla films, they kind of just don't give a shit about the human plot, and sometimes that works. But in Godzilla Minus One, they actually care about the human plot, or the plot for the human characters, and it is really good. And it makes for a very, very good movie that I can easily recommend to almost anybody. Eileen. Eileen is an odd movie. It's a film that I really, really want to like, but there's not enough there for me to just say that I like it. I think the film presents a lot of good ideas, but it doesn't do enough with them. Like, I guess another way to say this is that the film has, like, a really good skeleton, but they didn't bother to put any meat on the bones. Like, that's what this film is missing. It's missing the meat. Like, yeah, it's got a really good foundation for a great story, but it just doesn't do anything else outside of that, which is unfortunate, because if they actually did go the extra mile with this movie, I could see myself really liking it. But as it stands right now, I thought the film was just nah. Silent Night. Silent Night is okay. The gimmick with this film is that the main character can't talk. He got shot in the neck or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But the point is, main character can't talk, but then for some reason it's like no one else decides to talk either. I mean, like, his hearing works. So I don't know why no one else in the film is talking. But yeah, the whole thing with the film is that there's no dialogue, and this is over-the-top action film, which on paper sounds fun, but at the end of the day, it was just okay. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is another film that I think is just okay, but for different reasons. To be fair, nothing in this film is, like, outright terrible. My biggest complaint, though, is with the development of the main character, the Mr. Snow. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention or if I missed some stuff, but the development for his character didn't seem to make sense. Like, his motivation seemed really left field given what his background was. Like, he's got a background of being poor and coming from nothing, so the fact that he acts the way that he does and the fact that he turns into the character that he does didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. But I don't know. I'm willing to bet that big fans of the series are probably like, oh, well, he did it because. Well, it didn't make sense to me, and honestly, I don't care enough about the Hunger Games to really look into it. Wonka. Now, I know I'm not the first person to say that Wonka, as a film, really surprised me. Like most people, I thought that this film was going to be a complete train wreck, a complete dumpster fire, based on the trailers. But no, this is actually a very charming movie. I really liked it. The musical numbers were pretty memorable. Timothée Chalamet, or I don't know if it's his name pronounced Timothée, but yeah, his performance as Wonka is really great. The only criticism I have is for Hugh Grant, but I've heard that Hugh Grant himself didn't exactly enjoy working on this film, so maybe it's his distaste for this film that sort of bled into his performance, but that's all speculation. Overall, I thought this film was a pleasant surprise. The Boy and the Heron. The Boy and the Heron is on my top 10 list for films I saw in 2023. I thought this film was pretty damn good, and it's a Miyazaki Studio Ghibli, or some people say Studio Ghibli, but whatever, don't get mad at me if I'm not pronouncing it right, but all in all, the animation looks stellar, as always. I mean, minus Earwig and the Witch, but we don't talk about that. However, I will say that this is not my favorite Miyazaki film. Let's say I'm talking to somebody who's never seen a Miyazaki film before. This would not be the film I would start them with. This is a film that is great for people who are already fans of his work. If you already like his work and you've seen a bunch of the other films, then this is more of what you've come to expect. It's more of what you love from the studio. So yeah, that's why it's in my top 10. It's still really good, even if I don't think that it's the best that studio has put out. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. This was the last film to be released that is a part of the DCEU, and what a poor end to this cinematic universe. This film is not that good. It's pretty bland, it's pretty boring, it's pretty forgettable, and that's unfortunate because the first Aquaman film is actually a really fun and memorable film. So it's unfortunate that none of those qualities translated to this new movie. But as I said, yeah, it's not good. It's pretty forgettable. Whatever. Good Burger 2. So after all these years, we got a sequel to Good Burger in the form of Good Burger 2. Unfortunately, Good Burger 2 is just a clone of Good Burger 1, but worse. It does all the same plot beats, all the same jokes. In fact, like, some of the jokes are carbon copies of jokes from the first film, but just done worse. And it's made more apparent when you watch these two films back to back. So, yeah, I don't know who was asking for this film. I don't know. If you like Good Burger, just watch the first one. Ferrari. Rah, 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 rah. Overall, I thought Ferrari was alright. I mean, sure, Adam Driver is excellent in it. I think the story was fine. I don't know. I think it's kind of hard for me to put my finger on it, but it felt like the film was missing something. Like, I understood what it was about, but still, I don't know what it is. Maybe some of you who've seen the film understand this better than I do, but yeah, I just felt like the film was missing something. So, yeah, overall, I thought it was alright. I thought the performances were fine, the story was fine, but yeah, it needed a bit more in order to, go that extra mile. The Family Plan. Alright, so the first part of The Family Plan takes place in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. I don't think it's literally in Buffalo, New York, but the story takes place there. And instead of telling you what this film is about, I'm just going to say that it did not represent Buffalo in that good of a way, or rather, it didn't represent it in like an actual Buffalo way. So you know what? This film gets a 0 out of 10. just because it shat the bed when trying to represent what Buffalo is and what Buffalo looks like. So, yeah, and while I'm at it, fuck you. Alright, this is the last movie. Last, but far from least, is Poor Things. When I did my review video for the year of 2022, I said that Jordan Peele's Nope was the most unique film of that year. And Poor Things is the most unique film of 2023. Poor Things is an incredible movie. The shots and scenery all look like it's straight out of a painting. The performances are fantastic. The message and themes are very deep and rich. Yeah, this is an easy recommendation. As of the recording of this, I think it's streaming on Hulu. And Emma Stone won an Oscar for her performance in the film. So, yeah, again, easily the most unique film of 2023. It's in my top 10 list for 2023. So, yeah, this film is incredible. Like, watch it. Just watch it. So that's it. Those are the 114 films that I saw during the year of 2023, or at least the new releases that I saw in 2023. If you've made it this far, God bless you. I know the video runtime is probably about an hour. You know, you didn't have to give up an hour of your day, but I really appreciate it if you did. Honestly, I don't know if there's going to be a next video or when there's going to be a next video. So, yeah, again, I guess all I can say is thank you. And, yeah, let me know what movies you saw and which ones you liked. So, yeah, thanks again.